We are traveling home one by one. We are traveling across that river our friends have gone, and we are following one by one. Deliver us from the gathering storm, sheltered from the coming harm. Deliver us from the gathering storm. Keep us living safe and warm.
November 5th, 2004. I'm here with noted skeptic Val Rowe, a direct descendant of Chief Seattle, registered member of the Snohomish tribe here in the Northwest. I spoke with her recently, and she amazingly regarding the paranormal, she's a skeptic. So let's start right there. How do you? That was where that was the first thing we talked about. So do you recall that conversation?
Yes. Yes.
Can you briefly elucidate?
I don't know if I can speak specifically to paranormal. I can speak as to some of the Native American beliefs that I think are filtered so heavily by the white man or races other than true Native Americans. And as a recent visitor of the new American Indian Museum at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., the impression that I came away with was so heavily interpreted by the white man, and the artifacts within the museum contain those items that were traded in the 1800s by the white man that the Indian then incorporated into their day-to-day lives, whether it be an actual useful purpose or artwork or clothing. So I think that the pure Indian culture has been lost for 150 years or more, depending on tribes and as the white man migrated west in the United States. And in the actual museum itself, that it was such a tribute to Washington, D.C., the impressive sandstone building, the trying to validate the museum with the Indian so-called experts that were part of the staff that put the museum together. And I think those Indians, many of them were somewhat like myself, were not full-blooded Indian, not that the blood matters. I think it's the culture that matters, and I think the culture is lost, and I think it's 20th and 21st century partial Indians trying to recreate something, and they're not sure what that something is because they really never had it. And at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, when so many Indians went through the schools, the family separations, the absolute line in the sand, you cannot speak your language anymore, the languages were lost, the cultures were lost. My hat's off to people that are trying to find it and capture something. I personally don't feel the need because I don't think I would get my pure heritage back from anyone or anywhere. And that's probably why I'm skeptical as far as the beliefs that are now being proclaimed by many Indians in the sun means this, the wolf means that, putting all this symbolism out there that I don't necessarily believe was ever there pre-white man.
What about in the DNA, the encoding in the DNA? Do you think that it's possible that some of the experiences of your ancestors, even though they may not be there 100% in your blood, your blood ratio? Don't you think that maybe that there's still there are seeds of encoded knowledge that maybe can crop up and people can use those to get back on a more environmental, say, path?
Absolutely not. I totally disagree with you, and maybe I'm hanging my hat on one single show that I've seen 3 times now on PBS about tracing humankind from inception and tracing it with science in DNA that has genetically proven that man began, I believe it was somewhere in
Africa.
And migrated. It showed the path splitting off towards India, the ones going up to Europe, Scandinavia, the ones going further out into Siberia, and it's only able to be discovered through males, through blood testing and genetics. But they have proven the migration of man in the world from the roots out of Africa, and proven how did one become white versus black, and the impact that geography played on evolution. And that's what I believe in. And because it's been proven, there's answers, and the rest of it is, the culture of the Indian. I equate it, all of the stories that are now being either retold or made up, similar to the Bible or the Quran or the Torah. They're all fiction. Somebody wrote those stories and made them up. They're not real.
Do you think the ancient or the Indians that were here a couple of hundred years ago were are you saying that we can't trust, like, that they were closer in touch with nature or anything? I mean, that.
Oh, no. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that Indians as a race and inherent in their culture was a way more efficient lifestyle as far as impact to our earth. I would agree with you 100% on that, but I don't know that that has any magic to it. It's just what they did to subsist and survive. And
so that was a knowledge base that is sort of gone aside or gone away. The knowledge of the plants and all that. So you just see that as a knowledge base that sort of got dissipated and
eroded. Yeah, exactly. So
the stories
there's any magic unless somebody can come up with. For example, I'm reading Angels and Demons. The big blast, where is that moment of creation? Was it truly something created by some almighty, call him God, call him whatever you want? I'm not a believer in that.
So the old Indian stories about, let's say, Sasquatch or Thunderbird, do you think... Obviously, somebody thought it was real enough to build, the totems and things like that. Do you think that they were being fooled? Some of the Indians were fooling some of the other Indians into believing in those?
Do you really think that those symbols are any different than the icons in the Catholic Church? It's stories that were made up. It's more artwork than truth. Yeah, sure, somebody made them up.
I don't know. Do they worship? Do they worship the totems though? Or I'm just saying that I'm not sure that I'm wondering if it's apples and oranges because maybe the Catholics maybe there's more worship involved there, and maybe with the Indians it's more like. I don't know. I can't speak for them, so I don't know.
A lifestyle-based belief that it's incorporated into their day-to-day gathering of food or
some kind of belief system, though. Yeah, a belief system, I guess.
The buffalo gave his life for me. I have to honor him by doing certain rituals.
Well, I would look at... the place I started with this was it's obvious that a lot of people are seeing this hairy man in the forest. There's modern reports every day, and it's hundreds of people every year are seeing this thing. Now, who knows what it is? Now, my starting point was... There's also evidence that it's been going on for a long time. So perhaps the Indians saw this thing and they did a totem about it, and maybe it was a quote real thing, although we don't know exactly what it was. And maybe they were just maybe it wasn't so much fantasy as just this is something that's out there in the trees or something.
Well, I think Sasquatch is a relatively new thing that some white man made up to fool people.
That's the story in the media, for
Yes,
sure.
it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I've ever seen a totem. And I've been up to some of those really incredible museums and seen totem poles up in British Columbia. I haven't seen one representing a Sasquatch. So I'm definitely a skeptic when it comes to that,
Okay.
and a non-believer.
In your own life, you have you had anything that would point to another side of things? Any kind of paranormal experiences in your own life?
No.
No.
No, I mean, for years and years, in my childhood in the 50s and 60s, we would go up in the Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams area every summer for 2-3 weeks, camp out. We'd see a lot of wildlife, pick berries. My mother had to pick on the white side of the road. My dad and my sisters and I got to pick on the Indian side, which I thought was totally foolish. But we never saw anything, except a white man kill a bear one day.
What do you think it might be? Can you speculate as to the people that do see Bigfoot or do see Mothman, which some people feel is the Thunderbird? If a person, these people that have seen Bigfoot, Thunderbird, do you think that what do you think is going on there with them?
I still need proof. I don't believe it. I think sometimes people can actually see things that they want to see that may not really be there as well.
And their desire to see it would be... Can you speculate at all?
I personally think that there's something lacking in their life, and they're looking for something. I'm personally very content with who I am, my life, both on a big scale and a day-to-day scale, and I take full responsibility for my own life and actions and happiness. So I think people are looking for something because something's not quite right inside those people.
So assuming hypothetically that even though you haven't seen I imagine you did see some totems that had Sasquatch, you probably just didn't realize that it was Sasquatch.
Sure.
But assuming that's true, and we find the book and I show you those and everything, what would you say then? Would you say that that's just a tall tale?
Yes, because to me I would compare it to the gargoyles at Notre Dame. It is no different. They're symbolic. They're legends and stories that were made up partially to entertain people. And I don't believe they're true.
Well, there was a story you were telling earlier that was kind of funny. It was that you had a festival or something, and you hired a guy.
Oh, our Indian tribe. I went to one of the Snohomish Indian tribe powwows up at Marrowstone Island across from Port Townsend, and I was pleased in that they did the true, what they call planking of salmon, and roasted it around this open fire pit, and it was amazing. And we were eating native foods in that the white man wouldn't normally go to the grocery store and ever find something like a horse clam and actually eat it, where the Indians knew how to prepare it. And we had them, and they were delicious. I was shocked. However, when it came to the more cultural, or I guess I'm going to call it entertainment side of the powwow, there was not a Snohomish Indian there that was a storyteller like the one that the tribe decided to hire for the event that was of another tribe. I believe he was either a Muckleshoot or somewhere down around the Nisqually or southern end of the Puget Sound. And it's not that his tribe and our tribe might not have had a lot of similarities in culture, but I found that highly amusing that they hire somebody out of a different tribe to come participate in the powwow to tell Indian stories like those stories belong to us. And I guess I would equate that to the size of Europe, and it would be like somebody in France hiring a German to come tell them French stories from the past. So I found that amusing and took the stories just as they were, as fictional stories, not truth.
If you had something, if you were to address the whites of the country and just give them a message about whatever you would want to say about the natives, what would you say?
I guess when I see the tribal disputes over being recognized by the federal government and the money that the federal government gives to those recognized tribes, I don't see an improved way of life in reservations and communities around reservations. For example, when my sister lived in Omak and she actually worked at an elementary school on the reservation, and the disproportionate number of adults in the Indian community that were either incarcerated or had been incarcerated in not just the county jail but the state prison system was very sad. And yet these same Indians, because they're members of the Colville tribe, get a lump sum of money every year, of which they run out and squander it. Big screen TVs. I mean, there are certain businesses in communities like Omak that are targeting that annual check that come in from the federal government to these Indian populations. If I could say something to the federal government that I thought would make a difference, it would be take your money and invest it in education for these people, invest it in economic development, not necessarily around casinos, but help these people be productive, self-sufficient, happier people than the outcome today, of which I see as a high rate of alcoholism and a huge high school dropout rate.
So you're not really a fan of it sounds complex. You're not really a fan of integrating the Indian, or are you?
No, I never said I wasn't. I am an integrated
right.
Indian. And I think that it would be a good thing if you could convert the people that are so dependent on that check just for subsistence because they haven't invested into themselves as individuals, whether it's education or building their own business or choosing to live where they want to live versus feeling as if they have to live on a reservation. Now, I'm all for integration if it's what they want, but I think that there's much healthier ways for the government to invest their dollar and healthier ways for these people to live their lives than what I've seen on reservations today.
Another lady that I interviewed is a direct descendant of Chief Cornstalk. He's from Ohio, back in the Appalachians, sort of, and she felt as if there was some kind of she had increased intuition about things. Do you feel like that? She attributed it to her Indian bloodline. Do you have any? Do you have an increased ability to sort of?
I don't know that I really believe in
intuition.
Intuition, yeah. I think things that are likely to happen, somebody could get a feeling then that they are going to happen, and
cause it to happen, or
yeah, direct things toward that because that's what they think's going to happen. So
manipulate events.
Right.
Any other thoughts on what about the Thunderbird totem we had over here? Go ahead.
You describing the other woman being a relative of Chief Cornstalk. Now, if that isn't a white man's name, what is?
Yeah.
For example, Chief Seattle is...
Exactly.
I mean, the true name, I believe, was Seattle, and I mean, it was the white man's version of his native name, where you see some of the Plains and Eastern Indian names became so English. I mean, they converted their names into names that were comfortable for the white person.
Yeah, refused to call him by his real name.
Exactly. So I feel sorry for that woman.
Do you feel any special affinity for this area? Because this area of Seattle that you live in has a tradition of India being an Indian community, and we have the Thunderbird, or I guess the totem over there has been replaced by
the Dreamcatcher.
By the Dreamcatcher. Do you feel a sense of connection to this place?
Oh, I do, but I don't know that it's really tied to any cultural objects like totem poles or whatever. I think it's more for the natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest.
Here we are with Val's son, Anthony. I was trying to get him to say that Val was totally making up everything she said, but here he is.
The white balance.
Have you had any paranormal experiences?
No.
No? Seen any ghosts or anything?
Ghost right here.
So
Look at that. That's in the Mini Cooper, right?
yeah.
Where's that at?
That's like a couple months ago.
Do you feel that your mother has latent powers that she's not admitting to? Any intuitive powers? Really? Can you elaborate a little bit?
Well, I think I have power over him, but it's not anything intuitive. It's all pragmatic, common sense, and a group of highly communicated expectations from mother to son.
Why?
Becky
You
has.
might be using that later tonight.
We're here with Becky.
Becky X.
She just got back from Mexico, where she had some paranormal experiences. Here we go.
My mouth's full, so I'm gonna make you sip like chew.
You want to go? No. Go.
I'm almost done. Okay, so we were where I was tossing and turning and not able to sleep, and it seemed like I'd been awake for a couple hours, and I obviously drifted off. And the only reason I know that is because later I woke up and realized it was a dream. But I had fallen asleep, and in my dream I couldn't sleep, and I was laying in the exact same place,
Right.
exact same room, exact same time.
Did you say what town this was?
This was in Playa del Carmen in the Yucatan Peninsula. And so I'd fallen asleep, and I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't sleep, and I hear this noise out in the other room. And I thought, oh my God, what is that? It just sounded like an intruder or something kind of freaky. And then I heard Jessica's voice at our door, you know, saying, you guys, or whatever. And so I got up out of bed, and I woke up at that point and got out of bed because I had heard Jessica and went over the door, and of course she wasn't there, and I was like, oh, fuck, that was a dream. So I went back, and I went back to sleep. And then I started dreaming again, and in this next dream, there was, I kind of rolled over, and there were two of Scott in bed. And one Scott was the sleeping Scott, and one was the awake Scott. And they were dressed different too. They weren't wearing the same clothes either. They were both awake, but one of them represented the sleeping Scott, and they didn't see each other. I was sleeping in between them, or I was kind of actually on my knees, like, what the hell? And I saw these both two Scotts, but I just knew that one was the sleeping Scott and one was the awake Scott. And then they both saw each other and freaked out.
Right.
And so I'm like trying to explain to them, wait, you're the sleeping Scott, and you're the awake Scott, and that, however, resolved itself. And then and sleeping Scott was gone. He just dematerialized or whatever. And then I was laying there talking to Scott and dreaming, talking to Scott. And I looked behind him, and the wall behind him, there was like a 2 or 3 foot section long. Part of the wall that was no longer wall was like a forest. And there was a woman in 1890s garb with the big hat on and the scarf holding the hat, and the high neck dress.
Right.
And it was all white, and she was on her knees crawling towards us in the woods. She didn't have a face. Her face was there was just no face. And that was when I woke up, and I woke up going, ah! Because it freaked the crap out of me when I saw the woman crawling at us in her Victorian dress with no face.
Exactly what it sounded like, too.
And I remember that when I yelled, that it took every amount of energy I had to actually yell. It was so hard to get my voice out because I was asleep. And I just remember thinking, why can't I yell? And I finally did. It was just oh.
Yeah, because I can yell really loud. That's all. Wow.
I talked to a woman a couple weeks ago. Scott?
After she had her dream,
Obviously, I woke up when I yelled. I woke him up too.
I had a dream that I woke up as well in the room. And and I don't know who was talking to me, but they kept on changing the person who was talking to me. So I never had I could never really get a fix on who it was, but they were explaining what was going on because we both felt a little bit weird. They were explaining that
He's out in the living room.
that it was basically that it was the fact that we were right next to a Mayan ruin, which we were, and that there were pranksters that were angry that we were on their land, and they were also angry that their ancestors were working for us, for
Building the houses for tourists to stay in.
for us, the people who weren't from there. They felt that was wrong, and then they also It was also talking about the idol that was out, which was an old. There was
I had it for sure.
There was an old. What was it? It was a statue kind of idol that going into our room. You saw it. It was the first thing. It was like in the. And they put it.
Back section in the wall that they had made a space, and they had put a big, kind of Mayan statue in the house. So that was the first thing you saw when you walked in our room.
And they were talking about that, and they were talking about that image, and they were that idol, and they were talking about how it was wrong.
For it to be used in that context.
Yeah. That was about it.
Well, what did you say? Did you have a funny response to it, though? Remember you had a response to that? You did, and you said something that was really funny. It was really funny.
I remember, hold on. Oh, that will, I go, that's gotta be,
That's fine for us.
I go, that's gotta either be real or that would make a really good Scooby-Doo episode. I said that in my dream.
Did anything else strange happen?
Crazy.
Anything else?
I don't know. It's hard to sleep in that room after that.
We don't know where he is.
We kept on being awake,
Want me to help you find
waking
him?
up frequently the rest of the time we were sleeping there. So
We'll help you find his Buzz Lightyear pistol.
I didn't sleep well until I got home.
Where is he? Let's go.
Kate from Texas writes in to the Mothman list. She says, if Mothman is real, there are two main possibilities discussed by those who post on various boards. The first one that comes to mind is the malicious intelligent entity theory, and it may be the case. It is easier to believe this, as we have been taught that evil wears black, and the glowing red eyes don't seem to help this reputation. It is just as possible that Mothman is a living creature with special abilities that likes to confuse humans for his own amusement. It is just as likely that he is good, whether angel or living organism, and wants to help, but can't seem to get the message across to most people. I would rather believe that the Mothman is good, but I'm not ready to throw out the malicious intelligent entity theory either. Since becoming interested, I have had several strange things happen to me. These are probably mere coincidence, made more than it is by an obsessed mind. But what the hey? Any explanations, paranormal or mundane, are welcome. The first incident was a blank email in my inbox. There was no sender's address, no subject, no content. It was just totally blank. The second was the sound of a woman screaming a block from my house, but it sounded in blasts like a cry of a bird. After the noise, I saw 4 orange balls of light streaking down my street. There was no car, and I saw the entire street being lit up. I also noticed the sound of an engine running. Then there was the dream. This may be nothing more than a product of an obsession, but a couple of nights ago I dreamt of water. I fell from a boat into muddy, alligator-infested waters and swam to a partially submerged hotel. Night fell, a storm blew in, and I had to swim out to rescue 2 children, a mentally retarded boy and a deformed boy. I rescued the deformed one, but I was unable to save the retarded boy, much to my dismay. The dream went black, and I saw a tree-like person. I saw an elf. It's an ent. I don't know what this word is. Ent-like. Ent-like.
Ents from
The Lord of the Rings.
Okay, an ant-like tree person. He was covered in moss and had beautiful green-blue eyes. She probably just watched the movie. He had beautiful blue-green eyes, beautiful if they were not attached to something that wanted to eat me. I was frozen in fear when a black fluttering of wings dive-bombed the tree, causing the tree to shatter. Then the Mothman stood before me, wings outstretched. He was jet black, his head was hunched over, and he had bright red eyes. The odd thing was that I was not afraid, as I got the impression that the Mothman was protecting me. As I look back on the dream, I believe that it was just as likely that the tree and Mothman were competing for prey. No matter what anyone says, I still don't want to meet this thing in reality. A large part of me wishes that the Mothman is or was real, but I'm still trying to remain somewhat skeptical. Trying to remain skeptical. I had to walk away from this stuff for a couple of days. For research on the Mothman is beginning to consume me. No one else really knows about my interests except for those on the board. This board. I've been getting phone calls in which no one speaks. There isn't even any background noise. And I've been experiencing headaches and muscle weakness. Whatever this thing is, I don't trust it. If anyone can help me explain what is going on, it would be greatly appreciated. I'm 19 years old, I live in Texas, and I try to live a normal life. Thank you. Kenny, do you have any ideas about this dream? What do you think's going on with this 19-year-old?
Well, I think many levels. I think one aspect is, I mean, those characters, whatever the description of the ant-like character is a dominant theme. Almost, it can be a form of the Mothman, in which I think the Mothman, like, you know, we were talking earlier, our perception of things is just how we register and how we're conditioned to register them. And you know, in other parts of the world, it was the Green Man. You know, was this pagan character that would come in and kind of do the similar kind of experiences that would happen with this Mothman character. So I think, you know, people in this kind of collective unconscious we have, you know, will start to leak into each other and how they're going to interpret what their vision is. And it's like, you know, it's like worship. You know, if you want to worship God, it's almost like a necessity to go through these kind of idols or icons, even though most religions say, you know, there's only one God. You know, Judaism don't worship these false idols, but still they go through it. They do these rituals. You know, you look at the Sacred Heart of Jesus or whatever you need to get through to that other side. And that's kind of what the Mothman is, or the Green Man, or this ant-like character is. This what our perception is, and how we're gonna be able to adjust it to our mental structure, our psyche. You know, like the Native Americans who couldn't see the ships, Columbus's ships. It's the same thing. Once you get adjusted, and what was I going to say? I think, you know, I think she's slowly, you know, it's just such a multiple fold, and it's investigating into this other realm, and those are the polishes. I mean, this is how we do it. We either do things like perceive the Mothman, or perceive the Green Man, or angels, aliens. However our reality is, and then I think she's at that moment in one's existence where, like in Tibetan Book of the Dead, if you see them as demons, they will become demons. If you perceive them as angel, they will become angelic. Whereas Einstein said the most important question in this world is whether you perceive the universe as one of evil or good. So, that's what she's at this moment. She's at these crossroads. She's at that prime aspect in her life where she's starting to develop her perception of the world, her cosmology. And, it comes up in all these visions and images, and that's how we do it. That's how our mind is, the human mind deals with that stuff. Through symbolic poetry, symbolic religious icons, or symbolic, either aliens, Mothman, Green Man, whatever. She's trying to develop this, her cosmology of the world, and it's like this crossroads, this moment. Is the Green Man, or the ant-like character, is it going to eat her? Is it bad? Is it good? She's described as these beautiful blue eyes. I mean, her description of it is one of really peacefulness and kind of comfort and good. But then she gets and then all of a sudden this Mothman creature comes up and shatters it. It's like, and then she's like, I was saved, but then they competing for food, for prey? So she's at that age, this 19-year-old. She's at that moment where she's like, now, do I see the world as this way or that? Do I see the world as somebody who's preying on me? Do I see the world as somebody that's good? Do I see the world as the Green Man or the Mothman? And each time if she goes deeper, and she was going in her subconscious, she got thrown into the swamp-like waters, which is always pretty symbolic of the kind of our deep unconscious. Water definitely is always symbolic of our unconscious. It's a dangerous world, but she wants to do good. She has to save these helpless creatures, these helpless characters. What was it? A kid that was retarded, or
yes, there was
disabled?
one who was retarded and one who was deformed.
Deformed. So these kind of she's trying to do good in this world, and there's and herself and their psyche. I mean, there's all multiple layers to a dream. So the psyche of her own self, and she's trying to save her own kind of she's a lot of stuff's going on, so she might feel deformed herself.
She saved the one who had a physical defect, but not the one who had a mental defect.
Yeah. So that's all her own stuff. I mean, there's multiple layers to a dream, and so there's a spiritual realm. There's the egoic, the psyche. So that's all going on there. But I think at the bottom line, she's at a point in her life where she's trying to perceive her cosmology, and what her perception of the world is, either one of good or one of evil. Is she going to perceive these entities as being angelic or demonic?
My answer, I told her a little bit about just a brief paragraph on my history with the Mothman, and I said, your tree dream is significant. My best sighting of Mothman was when he appeared at the location of our shrine in the mid-'70s. He seemed to come out of a tree. There have been a couple of other sightings like this where he appears to be masquerading as a tree.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oops. He might be the living embodiment of trees. Certainly all birds have a close relationship to trees. I've had several interesting experiences with trees in my life, almost mystical you could say, and I've speculated on Mothman Lives list that one of the avenues to finding out what Mothman is to study trees. There are also the Buddhist and Native American angles. I've gotten the most benefit from these areas of study, along with reading John Keel. I once had a dream prior to an initiation into a Buddhist order that a great glowing bird, manifesting as a tree, held the lineage of the order in its branches. The next day at initiation I was shown the secret order lineage chart, and it consisted of this very same tree holding the members in its branches. The Garuda or Mothman is often shown sitting above the Buddha in dark space, and the Buddha sits at the top of that tree. There seems to be a bond between people who are meeting Mothman either out there or in the psychic dream space. Many of the people on this list, unfortunately, let their born and raised Christian attitudes seep in, which makes them label this phenomenon as demonic and not to be trusted. They throw holy water at the entities and try to make them go away, not realizing that there is a component in themselves which is assisting the manifestation. If you are dreaming of Mothman, you are way ahead of the game in that you are beginning to integrate deeper aspects of your true spiritual nature. Aspects of the subconscious are becoming conscious. Hope this helps.
Well, I mean, even like the tree of knowledge, basically that's consciousness, becoming conscious. You know, when you're a baby, there's no kind of, there's a oneness with everything. You're not really a separate entity from anything. You just came out of the womb, you were part of this, you were part of your mother, literally, and so there's a whole process of existence.
It's called anastomosis.
Anastomosis.
It's when the branches of a system become connected.
Mm-hmm. But you go older and you find that you're becoming disengaged, and that's pretty much what the tree of knowledge was. Eve all of a sudden became conscious. God is unperceptible. I mean, understandable. This is so vast. There's nothing but God. Bishmalai Rahmani. It's nothing but God. But we need these things. We need the concept of the Mothman to get there. We need the concept of the Green Man, the Ents, the diving in, all these metaphorical essences to really kind of be able to get even closer to comprehending it.
One can study water and get to the same root source of the Mothman phenomenon. You can study trees, water.
As above, so below. Everything is... And it's probably closer to, the metaphor, I think, is probably closer to the reality than what our perceptions can muster. I think it shows more, like Fellini says, he really want to know me. Don't look at my life, look at my film. That's really getting into his essence and his psyche, and I think that's the same as what we are in this world. I mean, you really want to know the existence. You gotta like Van Gogh's Starry, Starry Night. That's probably closer to what is there than what our perceptions are.
Same with somebody who does Mothman research. You look at their research to find out who they are.
That's terrifying.
It was a joke. It was a good joke, don't you think?
Oh,
lame.
yeah.
It's
Don't
lame.
look at me. Look at my Mothman research.
It's a lame joke. Andre's the only one that could perceive it as a joke. We're all like, what?
But some people are famous directors, and some people are famous painters, and some people are just Mothman researchers. And it's just, but the idea is the same in every case. Look at the person's work.
There's no objective reality. There's no. I mean, Australian Aboriginals think that you speak the world into existence, you dream the world into existence, continuously. So, I mean, the power of prayer, whatever that is. I mean, there's certainly a lot in that. There's the studies that have been done on healing, on people with debilitating illnesses, and the process that one can overcome that, and not necessarily with the idea of hope, but maybe with the idea of prayer, of trying to rejuvenate oneself, or perceiving perceiving a goodness, perceiving a golden light. All the Tibetans do that. They perceive the golden light around them as when somebody goes into the next realm, and so it's.
Is that where the term golden comes in? That they use today? You hear a lot of the kids using it.
Oh God, that's interesting. That's wow. That's interesting. I never thought of that.
Or does that refer to the gold dust of the ancient Sumerian legends, that the gold dust that brought the aliens here to mine the gold, to create the gold dust to take back to their planet to save their atmosphere? They sprinkled the gold dust in their atmosphere. Supposedly it's the 10th planet that they live on. The ancient Sumerian legends.
I didn't know that, really.
Huh?
That's kooky.
Zechariah Sitchin.
Oh, really?
He's done he's the translator for the Sumerian texts. The texts say that's what happened, that these aliens from this 10th planet, every so many thousands of years we pass by it, we get close to it, they fly over, and they mate with us, they evolved us so that we could mine their gold for them, and that's where the whole thing about gold came from.
Huh.
And all the golden figures in the ancient Iraqi temples and things.
Huh.
They were supposedly birdmen, very big,
Really?
they could fly around and do things, and they had the little ships that they flew around in. But you find this same legend in all of the ancient cultures. It's very similar. In Mexico, you have Quetzalcoatl and his chariot that he flew around in, and they're all like large beings.
Who knows? Who knows
what forms existed?
Yeah, it's like you see these, like you watch these wildlife shows, and these guys like tagging these animals. What the hell is that? Do you think Do you think like these deer or these fish are like going, oh, I'm getting tagged by? They're probably like have no idea, no perception, cannot register what is happening to them. Why? And who knows what happens to us, and we just have no ability to kind of like perceive what's going on. The alchemists say the point where you should stand is where your fears and desires cross. Because if you become a glutton for your desires, if that's the only thing you pursue, there's no growth in there. And if you continuously avoid your fears, there's no growth there. So you have to find the medium where your fears and desires cross, and that's where you should be. That's where you can't go either far to either spectrum. But if you get to this point where and then that's where she's at. She's at. Everything is like her fears and desires are continuously crossing. Her fear of the Mothman, her fear of these ants, they're beautiful. There's it's not beautiful, and that's where she's at. And I think she's in a good space, and I think she's if she just trusts it and keep working on herself, keep polishing her essence, and by investigating these things, I think she's doing the right thing. I really think we all need a teacher. We all need somebody to look over our shoulder and go, okay, well, be careful about that, or don't go too far into that. Hold them back. And I think she'd be truly blessed if she had somebody like that. But if not, we usually don't. So you just got to trust yourself and really take the time. Don't get too freaked out. But don't walk away. Don't, just be in the moment, be in the essence, and really look truly deeply into herself. And that is what she's doing, certainly with these dreams. And the process, she's investigating the world. It's going to be her cosmology, Either Sufi, Catholic, conspiracy theorist. That's your cosmology. Find it. Buddha said, go out and seek your own salvation. And that's what she's doing, I think.
I think for us it's important to remember that when we look at Kate, or someone like Kate, to remember that to look at her Mothman research, and not at her, but at her research, to really see who she is.
I think so.
What?
Are you joking or are you serious?
I'm joking.
Oh.
I brought
Andrea, get over
I
here.
brought the same joke again and got him again with it.
Andee came in to see me because Dr. Vega had given him my name and my phone number. And so when he came in, I think he may have been a little surprised that I wasn't at all perplexed when he said that he was coming in because he had some UFO experiences. So what we did was go in, do some regression, do some looking around. I wanted to establish that you know, kind of what kind of person he was, and if he would, you know, seeing UFOs all the time, or you know, just what the situation was. And he seems like a very normal person who had some kind of unusual experiences. So we went in and started to look around and go back and explore history. And one of the things that I tried to do was bring up some kind of conscious awareness, some kind of using some guided imagery for him to get in touch with some of the experiences that he'd had, to get them fully back, richer, fuller, and feel more real to him. So we did, you know, several things like that where we worked on connecting him with that, and so he could actually feel that he was having memory rather than imagining it. So we did several things like that. He brought me in the book, the Mothman prophecies, and I remember feeling a little weirded out by it. And so, but I did watch the movie, the one with Richard Gere. I did do that. And I enjoyed it, but I found that sort of genre of things to be unsettling for me. That was all. It was mostly that I couldn't sleep at night if I read too many things like that because it was unsettling to me. It was very interesting. And since then have thought about that when they, I think it was before an earthquake or something in Alaska, they were seeing these great big birds, these huge birds that were way bigger than an albatross or something. They had came and visited. So there really may be something to this that is, people don't know what to make of it. It doesn't show up that often. Could be something like that. So then I've worked on other people who've had UFO experiences. What I found was interesting is the similarity in people's experiences. And these are really normal people that have regular jobs doing other things. And that, you know, there was just too many things that were too much alike to be coincidence. And that they... or to be made up. These people had experiences, but there were a lot of similarities. And so, and I didn't feel like they'd read those similarities from anybody. They'd had those experiences themselves. And so one person I worked with was really, probably had an experience, and was afraid about it, of there being boogeyman or bad spirits or whatever. And we just kind of reframed the experience so that she was actually able to find a guide. There may be some extraterrestrial guides out there that are here to help us, that we just need to get in contact by getting intuitive enough or open enough to it. So this whole experience of there being extraterrestrial things might be angels, spirit guides, things from other planets, all kinds of ways to look at this and to think about it. But I've had over the years several people have different experiences of things they saw and experienced that are out of the normal experience. And these were, you know, one woman was a sheriff, was very, you know, for 16 years, and people have had that were very normal, good jobs, having these experiences. And Andee really feels very solid about things he's experienced, and and very curious about them. He didn't just blow them off. He's done a lot of research. And so I think him, by doing and collecting information, has come up with some pretty solid and interesting things, both his own experience and other people's too.
In my first session, I remember you found I would call it maybe a shadow in my aura, and you had me clear that, and at the end of that, it seemed as if you described it as that I felt like I was on a mission of some kind to find the truth.
And to be able to validate your experience and to let others know what's really there. So that Andee wanted to find that what his truth was, and the truth of his experience, and to be able to let other people know about this as well. Andee was talking in his first session about having an experience with his friend Timmy, and Timmy had a UFO visitation of some kind and was screaming and very upset. And when I talked to it, Andee felt that these UFOs, these whatever they were, beings, were in the room, and I told him he could just tell them to go away, and he said, that's what I did. And it seems like, in other work I've done too, is that you can tell these beings or whatever it is from other dimensions to go, and they will go. They have to honor that somehow.
Have you run across any people that, like Tommy, claimed that the aliens were steering him toward working for NASA? Because he ended up working for NASA, and his mother too.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I know that there were a lot of NASA people that worked around where Andee lived, and that there was some kind of connection with all that, and a bunch of really weird events that seemed to happen, and NASA. So, for whatever reason, these aliens, or whoever they are very interested in the space program. Is if you don't know what you're looking for and you don't have the sight for it, you won't see things. Like they said that the one of the reasons the Mayans got attacked by the Spaniards was they couldn't see the ships because they'd never seen ships before. They just weren't in their vision. So when Andee went and held hands with his friends and moved into this vortex, this particular area, then he was actually able to see stuff. And his friend was told, if you go stand here, you'll be able to see things. And I had another client actually that had a UFO. She was able to see them. Now, she had a small amount of LSD. She did do that and saw them. But what it did was, and that was the only time she ever did it, and she lived out near Mountain Home, actually in Idaho, where there's been a lot of sightings. And she said it was like they just came up like War of the Worlds, just whoosh, and then moved. And anyway, she had quite an interesting description of them that was very much like I have received from people who have actually seen them, run into them at places. One as a child, one was a woman in college, when everybody was gone from the campus. But what she said was that building where she was in was either a vortex, that farm, and she could see him by being there, or she said later, just because she had used the LSD, she was around places and it moved her somehow in her mind so she could see them, and she could see them when nobody else could for times afterwards.
Just last week I spoke with a woman here in town who grew up in Virginia, and she claims that when she claims she remembers being born right before she was being born, and she feels like it was a vortex of some kind was coming up from below, and it had to do with aliens, and somehow they came out. There was an energy force that came out of the ground into the room, and she feels like she was genetically altered somehow at birth. And she's got strange things in her body. She's got like an extra urethra, an extra this, an extra that. Her body is now actually strange, strangely composed. Right. And she has an entire landscape now of knowledge of all of these entities and aliens, and there's a league a Freedom League or something where she enlists their aid. Can you talk about that kind of a person who's had it ever since birth? And
well, what's interesting is that really makes sense as far as physics, because you get near a certain energy field or a vortex, it's going to rearrange your RNA and DNA. I think about this woman that's interesting. It'd be interesting to see if she has children and what her children end up being like physically, emotionally, mentally, and what their abilities to see and for sight are. And but there's no reason why a real powerful energy field. I mean, think about this: living next to a nuclear reactor site, you might rearrange your RNA and DNA, and there's lots of things that can do that. Being next to some energy force certainly can alter ourselves and open our consciousness like this. There were a couple of people I know that had really open consciousness that were able to see UFOs when nobody else could. One was a little boy in Chicago. He saw this floating building with lights come at them, and he told his mom about it. Nobody else could see it. Another gal went around the library at the University of Montana. Everybody else was gone on Thanksgiving break, and there was one of these same buildings. Okay, I know of 2 instances that really surprised me where they were put under hypnotics by
Who's they?
people. A couple of clients.
Oh.
And one was a friend that we met, and one was a client. And how they were put under hypnotics by people in some branch of the service, and then given really weird instructions or something that were really, they were probably being experimented with in some way. And then I think the end instruction was to suicide out. And these 2 people made it out and got some cognition. And then they happened totally separate parts of the country, but the experiences were very similar. And the guys were affected very similarly. Their lives were a mess. One guy had ferocious addictions, but they were and they were able to pull themselves out of it and get their lives together. But there were some service people that were doing some branch of the service that drugged these people and did this stuff to them. And I've had that experience. It happened. It did happen, and I know that because these 2 people's stories from clear across the country were exactly the same story, and that they had been, I do not know for what reason, but what I felt was whoever was doing it from the military, there was some really evil, dark stuff going on that was very dangerous. And from where in the government or wherever, I did not know, but I knew it was all bad and destructive.
I went back and I bought some 1970s and 60s UFO magazines, which you have to take them with a grain of salt, I guess. But if you look at the tenor of the stories back then, there were a lot of things being written about this. It was pretty well. I mean, you could go to you could go to a magazine stand, buy one of these, and several articles about nefarious covert operations, and I think unfortunately that whole genre has been discredited. Efforts are made to make it seem like it's just sort of sloppy writing or whatever.
And the other thing is the people that were doing the remote viewing, that was a whole part of the CIA. That was a whole covert operation that actually pretty much ruined the people's lives who were in it, because it tripped them out through space and time when they probably didn't have the spiritual understanding to do it. Well, these people that were remote viewers pretty much had to want to be there. They didn't just bring them in and say, you do this. They really had to want to be there. And they recruited them because they had the talent and the there were some innate abilities. They had to see things other people couldn't see. But what happened was these guys got hooked on remote viewing like a drug, and that's what ate away their families and everything else. I mean, if you could leave time and space and present and go float through eternity and see and experience everything and have that kind of power, what people did was it was like tripping out on a drug, and that's the part that got them.
One of the witnesses I was driving around with in West Virginia, when we came close to this secret installation that her father had worked at when she was during the Mothman days of the 60s, when we got near there, she was recognizing landmarks. She recognized a rock formation. She recognized some other things. And it was strange because that's when I started speculating, well, maybe she's remote viewed this area.
Yeah.
And why didn't she know she was doing it? Why did it take being there for her to realize that she had been there?
Well, I'll tell you what, people have, now this is totally in a Christian vein. I read a story about a guy who had pneumonia and died. He was in the service. He was not a believer or a Christian or anything, but he saw himself lift out of his body because the nurses forgot about him while he died, and went up, and he had this presence come to him, and he thought it was Jesus. It could have been anything, and came and took him on a remote viewing thing. And he really didn't remember a lot of the things because it's in such a supernatural state. It's in such a normal, non-linear state that he recognized places. Then later when he was traveling across the country, he recognized places that this being took him to, but didn't ever think about them or realize them till then. I bet that's not so unusual. There's something in you that's like this thing you're connecting to, and you're staying with it, that's going to get you back through history. I think it's going to get you back to the history and the truth and the facts and figuring stuff out. And for some people it may look like, what the heck is this about? There's something about it that you are on a mission to do, and I think something good will come out of it.
Okay, it's 2/10/05, February 10th, 05. I'm here with Andee Booth, acupuncturist, natural healer, herbalist, practitioner of energy work. And we're going to be talking a bit about the Flight of the Garuda book. We were just talking, and she was mentioning an interesting dichotomy that seems to be playing out in the West and in the East. In the West, the Dalai Lama is against the honoring of the Garuda, and the being that rides the Garuda, Dorji Shugden, feels that it's evil, but the indigenous Tibetans don't feel that way. They feel it's an earth deity that protects them. So we have division in Tibet. And then in the United States here, we have a division between the Christians who feel that the Garuda is evil, and those of us who maybe are more open to other possibilities.
Yeah.
So what do you think about it, Andee?
Okay, well, let me just tell you about because I studied a lot about this, about Buddhism, and this particular thing about the Garuda and the Dorji Shugden, I think it is, the Dalai Lama, in some sort of his divination or some of his counselors thought him to be an evil spirit, didn't want him to be used in matters of divination anymore. So what he suggested is they don't do that. And what happened is the other sect of Buddhism said, no, we don't want to mess with the original teachings. So they're really the more hidebound ones. It's not quite like the Christians wanted to hold on. It's like they're holding on to their tradition, much like the Pope and the Catholic Church and the Vatican holds on to tradition and is afraid to change it. The Dalai Lama really brought in changes that he brought on that came about from his own intuition and his guidance from other people. Doesn't mean that the Dorji Shugden is evil. It just means that he just chose not to use it that being anymore. And here, the Christians think anything that doesn't from the Bible and that they're taught or spoon-fed is evil. They're afraid of everything. It's basically a religion of fear. They're afraid of sex. They're afraid of anything that's not like them. They're afraid of Muslimism. They're afraid of Buddhism. They have lots of fears. Do you want me to? Is that it?
You can keep
Okay.
You can keep on that.
My rant. Well, no, it's okay. It's just that Christianity, traditional Christianity, it sees itself as the imperial holder of spiritual truth, and it's ridiculous. And it's anybody who's willing to grow out of it will suffer if the people that are around try to keep them locked into that, and they feel threatened by them, and they'll punish them for leaving the fold, which isn't very Christian-like at all. I've seen 2 ghosts that I never thought I'd see peeling off people. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but they were about this big. They had the look about them as a black and white photograph that you could see through. And one gal was laying right on my table, and I was doing some muscle testing because I've taken a great deal of kinesiology classes, body talk classes, allergy clearing classes. I've taken all kinds of classes to be able to get in touch with the deepest part of the body-mind by muscle testing and access. So I got that there was some sort of a energy present in her that didn't belong, and I told it, commanded it to leave, and out walks this guy, kind of like this black and white photograph. He's got long hair and a business suit and a briefcase, and I'm like, now that is, and it's this just small like a picture, and he peeled right off of her and walked out the window. And I said, you know, the dangest thing just happened. And she said, I said, did you feel anything? And she said, I felt something leave me. I said, it's a guy in a business suit. And she goes, oh my God. She'd always felt her dad was so invasive of her energy. She said, my dad wore a business suit till the day he died, even in retirement. He wore a business suit every day. And then I had one other gal where a woman, an ancestor or somebody, peeled off of her and left too. But the first one just blew both of our minds because I didn't believe in that sort of thing. And out they came. So I've had a lot of experience in these types of things that I never expected to, that people don't think are real. I've also had so many clients have experiences with seeing extraterrestrial activity or angels or spirits, or have somebody come and talk to them, put their hands on their shoulders. I've had like 3 people or something they couldn't see, put their hands on their shoulders and talk to them. Very many interesting things, both in practice and in, I did a lot of studying, but most of it's been in practice now. I've been in practice for about 13 years, working with people and hearing their stories and finding things myself. Do you want me to talk about the East versus West? I didn't get into that.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Eastern thinking versus Western thinking. Western thinking is like Aristotelian dynamic cause equals effect, line A to B. Asian thinking is systems thinking. So, and that's how they discovered acupuncture was. Soldiers would get stuck with an arrow, this part of maybe on their leg, and their shoulder, the opposite shoulder, would get better. They started to see everything in systems, that if we rock something here, something else over there will be affected. They also have so much ancient tradition and history based on not testing lab animals or doing types of chemical experiences in the laboratory, but how things affected people. It was a very Taoist society, and they figured out all of the internal organs and the immune system without ever doing an autopsy because they believed the body was sacred. They never opened a body up. Figured all the meridians, which are just messaging centers through the fascia. They have a much bigger view of things. They're not as anal as Western medicine, and they're not as having to be as perfect, but they're very effective because how they see the whole big picture and how they utilize everything. Many ancient, I've been using some acupuncture treatments now that work unbelievably well that are from the 1800s. A Korean monk came up with them. Dr. Usui from the late 1800s came up with Reiki, which was really just passing energy on of a divination experience. All of their stuff accesses the unconscious and the broader mind than little A equals B equals C thinking.
Beltime talks about relationships a lot as being the key to understanding. And when you say systems, that sort of makes me think of relationships. But once you're in, you can be outside the system looking at it, but then you have to go in. And so once you're in there, you're studying relationships. Maybe you're not seeing, it just your point of view changes. You go in, but you still have to think about the relationships that you're working with.
Yes. Because even if you're seeing that, mouse ovaries do this when we stimulate something else, we ought to see also what's happening to the brain at the same time. And that is actually some of the work we're doing now is like Western medicine has gotten too specialized. I get people in here who I can find that there's something with their thyroid, and yet every test has come up normal. But then we find heavy metals or viruses on the thyroid, and it changes the picture totally. It's like Western medicine doesn't know what to do if something doesn't fit a paradigm, like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue. They just don't have paradigms for certain things because they can't see always the whole system. And not that there's anything wrong with Western medicine. It's the best for emergency care there is.
We're here with Rick Geist, who saw Bigfoot in the prime in the area of the Patterson film, Highway 299 between Oregon and California, and also his father-in-law. Father-in-law claims to have seen Bigfoot in that same part of that highway.
Yeah, so it was 1997, February, early February. My family and I were driving up the Coast Highway from San Diego to Seattle, and I decided to take a shortcut across 299 to I-5, and it was probably about 2 in the morning. No, we hadn't been drinking. We've been driving all day, and at one point it's a very twisty highway, and densely forested. And I came around a corner, and I saw a shape running across the road, and it didn't appear to be an elk. I've seen lots of elk and deer. It seemed like it was running on hind legs, and I've seen lots of bears, and they usually don't move that way either. So it was, just barely caught a glimpse of it in the headlights before it dashed off the road. Yeah, it was strange. It moved unlike anything I'd seen. It was tall, probably, man-sized, 6 foot or something like that, maybe a little bit bigger, and just moving fast. And it was bizarre, very strange. And I talked to I mentioned that I had seen something there to my father-in-law, and he said he'd had an experience around that area too, and not a clear glimpse of a Bigfoot, but something that was moving, like a biped. Is that the word for it? Hominid,
Mm-hmm.
or
Bipedal hominid.
So yeah, that's my Bigfoot story.
One of the interesting things we were talking about earlier was that when I heard your story the first time, I got a glimpse of the fact that maybe there had been some trauma in your life at that time, because a lot of times people will have these experiences when there's a death in the family, and I believe there was. You had said that there was.
Yeah, we'd just been down at hospital in San Diego. My stepmother was dying of cancer, and she ended up dying about 2 weeks later. We left when she was in a coma. So yeah, it was a stressful time too. So.
Have you had any other unusual experiences?
No, that's it.
No. Okay, it's February 18th, 2005. I'm standing here in my hallway, my entry hall. Behind me we have some crop circle images from 2004. Because what I'm trying to do is purify this hallway. Because when we moved in here a couple of years ago, we smelled tobacco in this part of the hallway. I heard noises. And it was interesting because it really came to a head, so to speak, when I was on the phone with Harriet, and we were doing in 2002, and we were in the early part of our research. We were doing some testing to see if we could remote view each other. And one of the things that Harriet did was she tried to see our house. She wasn't. I don't remember how she did in terms of finding it on the street, but just remote viewing the house itself, she pointed out that there was some being here, or entity, and at the very moment she was remote viewing the house, I heard a bang down here. I came down, and this knob was bent. If you kind of look at it this way, you can see there that it's bent to the right. So in a moment, I'm going to have a lady coming by named Ginna Lee, who clears houses psychically. Okay, Ginna is now going to give us some basics and lay out how she clears the house.
Basically, what I'm going to do is just sit in meditation and look at the energy as a whole. Feel what sensations I feel, use my clairvoyance, and start to take a look at the overview. Then I'll go through room by room after that. What I was noticing in the energy flow in the house is that it is not as your family sets the energy, because you and your family have a very playful, lighthearted, things flow smoothly, and with this foreign energy, I call any energy that doesn't belong here, that isn't yours, foreign energy, it makes it heavier, put the energy level at colors that you don't normally use, and it's jagged and choppy, whereas the energy flow is usually smooth and going in circular patterns. This is not. And so that's one of the things that I'm going to address. It creates a level of energy that you have to overcome. So things that usually happen easily is with effort, and you have to override and come above this energy to get to where you usually are. And normally you use lighter colors, but I'm seeing especially a dark purple and kind of a hazy brown in the house. And so what I do is...
And that's a color that you're ascribing to the energy to help describe it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, because...
Or is that what you're actually seeing the color?
I am seeing the color. I'm using my clairvoyance, the 6th chakra, my 7th chakra, which is the knowingness, and my hands, where I feel the energy with my hand chakras and the psychometry. So the colors, because it's me spirit that does this healing, my body is only a channel for that. It's not me body personality doing it. So spirit communicates in color vibration and sound vibration. So that's where I begin, and that's where I will be walking through the rooms, feeling and removing the energy that doesn't belong. And so when I find an energy that doesn't belong, my hands can sense that it starts to kind of tingle. And I can feel it's either cold or sharp or heavy, and so this is where I found the dark purple energy. And it's tingly, uncomfortable, kind of tension, creates a difficulty in putting thoughts together. So what you would usually do in 20 minutes might take an hour. And so what I do, it looks kind of like a traffic director. I use my hands in a way to make it real to my body, just to kind of take that energy and remove it. And in doing so, it's not like I'm throwing all this yucky energy out to hit your neighbors. Once it goes out of your house, it becomes neutralized. It goes back into the big mix. Another thing I noticed with this energy is it makes it difficult for your house to feel grounded, and for you as a family in the house to feel grounded, that you're safe and secure and can just be. And it's because you and your family have such a strong presence and strong spirituality that not a whole lot more is going on. Another family living in this house would probably have much more difficulty.
Do you think about at all, like, do you just see it as energy, and instead of, or whereas some people might ascribe it to a ghost or something? Do you sort of?
Well, right here I'm working on the purple energy, which is a direct result of I call the energy of ETs. There are a couple of different kinds. There are the grays, and then there are the others, which have a darker, heavier aspect than the grays. The effect of the two working in this house is creating that heavy energy. And so like energy attracts like energy. If you start out with a purple, it's going to draw more purple. And so anyone who comes into your house will say, oh, I recognize that energy. And they will either gravitate toward it or be repelled and may leave behind some of their purple. So, and even energy that you don't know is coming in can come in through the windows, through the ground. The ETs themselves, they come in at times that you're asleep or you're gone, or even when you're here, they use such different dimensions that you don't actually have to see them for them to be here. I did notice one entity that vibrates at a bright red. It has a lot of anger in it. It moves from space to space within your house. So it's not stationary like some entities are, where they just kind of camp out in one area. This entity was here probably before you came to this house and is still here, left behind by previous owners. And that's one of the things that I will let Supreme Being help me with this in removing this entity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because my initial thing in the study of the house showed what you're saying about this space up here, and then the other thing I was saying was that it appeared that, and I attributed to the old man who had lived here before, that he was traveling from here to there into the garage, back and forth. But I want you to. There was a place in between here and there that I also think is a special spot. Did you?
Oh, in the bathroom, the little bathroom area, was also some heavy energy, and the effect of that is not wanting to be there at all. It's just, oh, in and out. Okay, I don't want to be here. And then down the hallway, you've done a lot to brighten it, with the color of the walls and the pictures and everything, but it's like stepping into a different dimension. You have to, I'm here, oh, now I'm here, oh, now I'm there. And so it's kind of jarring.
Do you think that the space affected the people? Do you think the space has made the energy that way? Is that what you're kind of saying? Is that it's the architecture itself that creates the feelings that go with the energies? Or?
Both can happen because energy flows differently in spaces that don't have a lot of angles, but also things that happen in a place will hold the energy, like the old man in your bedroom upstairs. And so both can be in effect.
Now earlier I pointed this out to the viewers, but I talked about this doorknob, and you can probably notice that it's bent.
Mm-hmm.
It was on the other side originally, and I switched it just to try to trip up the energy. I was having a friend of mine and myself were working on. We were practicing remote viewing. We were just testing to see if we really had the powers as kids that we thought we had, because this is an old friend, and I was having her remote view the house, and at that same day this happened. I came down and this knob had been beaten down. I heard loud noise. I heard doors opening and closing like a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
Now it won't open. Okay.
Now it won't open.
I think that's architectural, but
Uh-huh.
it bent it down that much.
Wow.
And then I just moved it over to this side to trick the ghost or whatever, but I don't know if it worked.
Mm-hmm.
But we also smelled tobacco in this spot.
When I was first looking at that brown energy, it had a smoky brown, hazy, smoke feeling to it. Yeah.
So yeah, I connected it with some kind of anger that he was having, that he would get frustrated and come out here. And I attribute it to the previous owner, but I don't know if that's who it really was.
Well, the entity left behind was definitely working closely with the previous owners, whether to their knowledge and consent or not, but it was definitely affecting them.
I did talk to the man who wasn't the original owner, but soon after the house was built, he grew up here, and I've met this person.
Uh-huh.
Do you get a picture of who he might be, just offhand?
Kind of big guy.
He wasn't, but
It wasn't him.
he was a wiry little guy. He seemed like a mob kind of a guy. He had a fast car and he was like 70 and he had a 20-year-old. He was a very great guy. He said he loved growing up here and
He didn't grow up here.
yeah, he did.
No, he didn't, because they sold. The Caldwells have owned the house since 1949. 1947. So
That's
he didn't grow up
weird.
in that.
That's
He grew up in this
weird.
house.
The stories don't even jive.
He's lied.
Who do you think he was? Yeah, let's move on. We'll talk about that one later.
An ET vibration is, a real, well, it's very similar to computer energy, only just really staticky, fast, and is not comfortable to the human body.
Now, when you say ET, and just for viewers out there, when most people hear the word ET, they think of a Martian, a green being. Now, can you paint a picture of an ET that maybe will be more up to date or more in line with
Sure. And
our thinking today?
Yeah, they come in many different forms. So one of the most commonly seen, experienced, and known are the grays, and they do have a gray appearance, kind of elongated, looks sort of human, sort of not. And then the others, they can come in all kinds of forms. They don't often show themselves in physical form. And the grays don't as much anymore either. It's just where they've made themselves invisible. So they can be here and you don't even know it.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? About the going from the invisible, what I call the void, because I'm a Buddhist, so we often talk about that, and that's a way that helps me understand it. Is there's void and there's physical and there's matter,
Yes.
and somehow there's a process by which things do consciously go from one to the other.
And that is something that they have perfected because they've been interacting with this planet for a very long time, but they don't want to be known as much as maybe earlier because we're catching on as a spirit to their games and what they're doing, how much interference and what they're taking from us. And so we're starting to break up the game, and that's why they don't want to be seen any longer, because then we would go, oh, heightened awareness here, we gotta go to war. And it is like another dimension where we are here in this physical form, and they can exist in that same physical form, but in another dimension, another reality, another vibration, where we can sense it, but we can't really stay there. And they come in and out through those ways.
Is there this is going to sound like it's coming from left field, but is there a connection between these entities and, say, Bigfoot?
I've never looked at that.
Well, my theory, based on the fact that certain, Bigfoots have been seen with ETs and UFOs by quite a few people.
Right.
And I come from a place in the world where we had a flying being, and I've actually found descriptions of this flying being as being like a Bigfoot with wings. And so I'm sort of seeing the two working together, one sort of a void or sky being, and one is sort of an earth being, and that they're some very related archetypes. What do you think about that?
That makes a lot of sense. And what I also find very interesting is the Yeti. All of these Bigfoot, Yeti, all of these beings tend to congregate in areas where there is a lot of spiritual activity, such as Tibet, or in South America, where there's a lot of native, very spiritual shamanism type healing going on, and here in the Northwest, and it's interesting, the dichotomy between those two energies.
Do you have any thoughts about the Men in Black? Because they seem to show up when people are seeing the ETs as well. Often they're there to scare people, it seems.
Yes, it's an intimidation, it's a denial, it's don't go there, don't look at that.
Do you think that the MIBs are real people, flesh people, or are they like a human like you or I in a body going through a normal lifespan, or are they something else? Or do you think there's both?
It looks to me like usually they are, when they are in a physical body, a human body, they have taken over the body personality and are operating that body. The spirit that belongs to that body is either completely out of it or in agreement for some reason or another, and so they can play out and walk among us, so to speak.
I don't want to go too far into that because unless that's something you're interested in, but they're often seen with new vehicles that appear to be 50 years old. You know, they'll show up, everything's brand new. Mm-hmm. There's brand spanking new clothing, black outfits, black car. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Yeah.
how there's obviously some kind of time shift going on. Do you have any feelings about the time shift or how that kind of stuff happens?
Well, you know, all time is happening all at the same time. And so if we knew how, we could, jump from what we would consider past time or future time, because it really is existing right now, all of it. And so we in physical form have to, go through the minutes and the hours and the years, but there are other entities that don't.
Are you familiar with John Keel, the author?
Not so much.
I interviewed him recently, and he talked about that. He talked about the fact that the future must exist. It all must be existing at once because people get glimpses of the future.
Yeah.
So if it's not already existing, how could they see it?
Right.
Do you see things in the future like that, or are you pretty much on
sometimes
current time?
I like to operate in current time because the thing about future time is it changes just like that because of our free will and because we might decide, oh, well, I don't like that future, and then...
I'm glad you're talking about this because that was one of the points I've been trying to make in my series.
Yeah. We are co-creating all the time. And so if we see a glimpse of something that's coming, we can say, don't want that, change it right then and there. It's when we're blindsided, or if we believe that we don't have a choice, that things, will continue as so-called preordained.
Right.
You know how different science fiction books talk about something and then 100 years later it's reality? They're tapping into that same thing. Writers, very often, their information or their muse is either another entity giving them that information, or they, spirit, are able to channel something that they can see.
I think it's strange.
So at 412, every
time.
You've had your heart checked over the past 6 or 7 years by a monitor that you sleep with, and at 412
a.m. every time.
You have a some kind of a what is it? An attack?
Arrhythmia.
Arrhythmia.
I go into arrhythmia in my sleep at the same time.
Wow.
And I usually wake up at that time. But I don't have any chest, but I wake up at that time.
Do you know that it's 412 when you wake up?
Usually around 4 o'clock, yeah.
Because have you had this happen? I'm able to wake up in the middle of the night, and oftentimes I will know exactly what time it is. I look over.
I do that all the time. I mean, I can wake up any time, and I know exactly what time it is.
Yeah. So.
This cardiac thing is just sort of strange.
Did you ever have anything happen to you at 412 that was...
No. I never really had anything bad happen to me except, being held hostage or... And you can die from that. I said, the doctor called me back today and said, how many runs does he pack in a house? He said 3. And he's like my newest doctor. The other one, I had 11 runs of VTAC at 4:12 a.m. I had 6 of them, 6 Holter monitors on. They put them on for 2 days, and always shows up at the same time.
Is this
I think it's weird.
is this connected with your use of that phentermine?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That's when it basically started, but that's also the same time I was held hostage
What?
at work.
412?
No, it was in the afternoon. That's when I got home at 4:12 in the afternoon, not in the middle of the night.
You got home at 4:12 in the afternoon?
Yeah.
When? What you mean when? Like in the Weight Watchers place?
No, when I was held hostage.
Oh, when you were held hostage at work at the hospital.
Yeah.
That was 4:12 p.m. when you got home.
No, not a.m. So maybe I'm 12 hours off. Hell, I don't know. I just think it's really weird. I'm going to tell my psychiatrist about Sarah in a couple weeks. And she knows everything about me, so I'll just tell her. I don't know.
Hello, Andy. My name's Carl Heck, and I live in Ohio. You recently sent me the DVD on the Mothman, and I had some information that you might be interested in on the serpent mounds, the crypto explosive uplift that it's on, and some other information. I sent you an email, but I didn't know whether it would get to you or not. I had some other stuff that Manson had sent me years ago, some of his poetry, which I recently came to mind when, I forgot that he had lived down in West Virginia, but it refers to hawk's claws and just some bizarre stuff that also relates to this Mothman stuff.
April 17th, 2005. I'm back on the Mothman tour here a bit in Seattle, in Seward Park, which is one of the last 2 old-growth forests in Seattle. It's on exposed bedrock, so it's an old mound of earth. It's a large kind of island. It used to be an island that had a peninsula. It was a peninsula part of the year. When the water was down, you could get onto it via the land bridge. Now the land bridge is gone completely. No, the land bridge is there the whole time. Now the land bridge is there 365 days a year because the lake level was lowered artificially a few decades ago. So this is old ground. Predates the Ice Age, just as the Kanawha Valley predates the Ice Age. The Ohio Valley does not predate the Ice Age. It's a newly formed river, but that's why we think we could have some Bigfoot or Mothman activity on Seward here, because it has never been cut down and it predates the Ice Age. Old land. Ken Alton had a encounter with something here one night. He mentioned earlier he'd seen some strange sticks, things that I've run into over in Frank Park, which is also old growth but a very small park. Sticks on mounds. I found some mounds with madrona encircling them, madrona trees, which are the trees that the Indians would meet under. And here in Seward we have the oldest stand of madronas, the largest stand of madronas in Seattle. Kenny's going to tell us about his sighting. Is this rolling? Kenny saw something large that could fly, kind of followed him one night all the way through the park. And this was around the time he was receiving strange sticks and stones and things. How about talking right here?
Actually, right up here is where it started. It was around twilight, a little before twilight.
What year was this?
It's probably about 4 years ago.
2001?
Yeah.
Around the 911?
Yeah, actually.
Okay.
And I came in here, and I knew, I usually come here at night. I know by the time I get out it'll be dark, and we came in here and there was all this rattling up.
So you came in at night. It was already dark.
No, it was like twilight. It was still light. It was still light. It was just getting dusk.
But once you were in there, became dark.
It was still light a little bit.
Okay.
But it was kind of that period where it's starting to get dark, and Lou and I came in here, and there was something up there, and she stayed focused on it forever, and we were like, because there's usually eagle gets mounted right up on that tree, and it was over here, and at first I thought it was just an eagle up there, but the shadow seemed really large, but I couldn't, it was like I could see it, but I couldn't really make it out, or I couldn't delineate it, define it, or something like that. So I didn't really know what to make of it, and we kept walking, and we walked kind of circular of the whole park, and it was up there every once it would follow us, but it always stayed to my left.
And would you describe it as something that was taking shapes that you weren't familiar with, so therefore you couldn't place it? Like, was it changing shapes, or?
No, it was up there. It was like something up there that I couldn't quite see. I mean, I was seeing it, but I couldn't see it. Like, I could see something up there, like blue. There's obviously something up there making noise. It was defined by something, and we just couldn't. I couldn't really see what it was. I would stare forever, and I couldn't really tell what it was. But Blue she was totally obsessed with it. She'd watch it, She seemed to be as curious as I was of what it could have been. We just didn't know.
So just last week, around the time the Pope died, is when I started finding these clues in Spring Park, and they were being left at what were crossroads or mounds. There are several mounds in Spring Park with the madronas ringing the tops. These are probably old ancient Indian mounds, and as Ted Holiday writes in his book, The Creatures of the Inner Sphere, the mounds are places that the dragons, or Mothman, come out of the earth, and they go to the mounds. They gravitate toward the mounds for some magnetic reason, and they habitate on the tops of the mounds. And there's many stories from ancient British literature about these battles with these apparently real creatures that could fly and had a dragon-like appearance, glowing red eyes, similar to the Mothman. Another thing that Kenny ran into was some strange writing, and this is similar to the writing that we found at 905 East Pine, which you were telling me about before. Can you describe that writing?
It was somebody had written all over, like throughout the whole park, they had written these on the ground, obviously with a stick of some sort, and this weird, it looked Arabic, that type of script, but it wasn't. It was really, it was like a cross between, I know this could sound corny, but it was like a cross between Arabic script and, what do you call those things? Those pictures you have on your wall? The
crop circles?
Crop circles. I mean, it was like these weird designs and symbols, but they're really beautiful. They're really elaborate and really cool.
There's a photo in the Psychic Sasquatch book showing some of that lettering, very similar, supposedly left by a Bigfoot at a healing spot. In other words, a power spot or magnetic spot, geomagnetic spot, where these entities tend to, perhaps if they are interdimensional, they go in and out through these places, these portals, vortexes, as some people call them. These Bigfoot contactees are saying that Bigfoots are saying that they built the mounds. And this is a direct connection between the Bigfoot and the Mothman. If the Mothman used the mound for its energy, and the Bigfoot builds the mound, well, there's an interdependent relationship there. Doesn't mean they're the same creature, but they're closely linked.
So it really freaked me out. I mean, it was like sent chills up my spine, and I quickly left. It was a little too much for me to handle.
My Buddhist teacher, Aryadaka, who grew up in Seattle and was very familiar with all the parks, he said this was a sacred island to the Indians. That they, it was. I don't know if he said it was a burial ground, but it was definitely sacred. Do you feel like that there's some connection to the Native American energy with what you're experiencing?
Maybe. I mean, it's probably because a lot of times when I've really been intensely thinking about something and like I don't really see a lot of owls here, and there was a couple of times when I was like trying to figure things out, and all of a sudden there's these owls that were up in the. I mean, I see the eagles a lot here, and other various like hummingbirds or woodpeckers and stuff like that. But it was like this really weird moments like that kind of like totem animal situations that could be interpreted as totem animal situations. And I definitely feel like there's really a mystical element to this place.
Have you met any strange characters in here, like
all the time.
The transients I'm talking about? That seem to be holy men or something, like they're in a trance almost.
Well, there was this one person, this Arabic guy that was walking around here, and obviously had a lot going on in him. I mean, it just seemed strange that this person was here, walking around. He didn't like have hiking shoes on. He had, kind of street clothes, but I really he seemed to take this place as a place that was really going to help him deal with what was going on with him. And we had an interesting undercurrent of a relationship going on, of kind of looking at each other, and you could feel like an intense understanding. And I would see him like get nervous around other people, but I don't know. I think we both had the same understanding of this place, and that's why we were comfortable around each other.
Now, had you experienced telepathy with him, you would be experiencing something that I experienced with a quote transient from my childhood who used to watch us play basketball, and sometimes it would seem as if I was getting clues about how to play from this guy, and I could have just been imagining it. But he intently watched us play basketball for years. I mean, and he never said a word to anybody. He refused to speak verbally. And I'm thinking that because he didn't do it verbally, he was able to channel all that energy into telepathic communication. Interestingly, Kenny had a stick incident happen right about the time of the Pope's death, when I was having my experiences with what may be Bigfoot or shapeshifters. You said that you found a strange stick at the work site.
Yeah, there was a long stick in the porta potty.
And what alerted you to that? Just the fact that it was there, or did it look strange?
Yeah, well, it's just like first, it's not like it's in the middle of an alley in the middle of a neighborhood. There's no like trees around there that are that big. It's pretty dense.
So not only could the Bigfoot be visiting us at home, but they could be following us to work as well.
Yeah, it was strange.
Could be.
I mean, I went in there and it's like this stick, carved stick.
Carved. It was like did it have a pointed end?
Had a pointed end. It sort of looked like a walking stick, but it didn't look too comfortable. But the bark was peeled off and looked like it was attended to of some sort.
And the end was sharpened. That's what the kind of stick that I found.
Not like extremely. It wasn't like whittled, but it was.
But yeah.
It was a sharp end. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, time has run out on the final episode of The Mothman's Photographer. 24 hours of material. Although I think we have 25 hours, we're probably going to have to do an extra disc of outtakes. We're not going to have time. I have a stack of papers 2 feet high from the last year. Interesting articles on different things that have happened. We've had these Mothman sightings in Yugoslavia, which came right about the same time as the flood in New Orleans, so I think that was probably the connection there. We also had some interesting sightings in Mexico, flying entities, some video footage of them. Doesn't really resolve the question of what it is, but there's definitely something floating around in the skies in Mexico. It is true that my sister has had 3 hostage situations in her life. One time when we were teenagers, she was held up at the Weight Watchers right across from Blaine Island in Mound, West Virginia, North Charleston. She thought it was me and tried to laughed at the guy and thought it was me with a hose on my head, but it turned out to be a real guy with a huge machete. And then later she was taken hostage by a man with a gun at the mental hospital in Huntington where she worked. And then this recent event with a guy holding a knife to her neck who had stolen her ring, her wedding ring. But my sister comes into play again here. Really, probably one of the biggest things that happened in the last year is this photograph that she sent me, and I'll try to get this across here. Hopefully you can see what we're talking about here. This is a picture that was taken in 1973, as far as we know, of me, taken by my sister, and she sent this to me recently, just a random kind of thing in a box with some other things. And I noticed, if you look at this window, if you look right there in the middle of that window at the bottom, you see a face. And that face, my friends, looks exactly like a depiction of the Thunderbird that I found in some of the Native American literature. It's unusual. I mean, this is the same week that I saw the strange shadow being / Mothman morphing figure come out of a tree. And it's almost as if the thing was looking in my house. It's, watching me. So, what else can I say? And when I had already named this series The Mothman's Photographer before I found out about this picture. So that's the amazing thing, is it seems as if I'm the Mothman's photographer in the sense that I did, or my sister was the Mothman's photographer, taking a picture of the Mothman, and we didn't even know we were doing it. So, with that, I say ciao. It's February 2005. I've got 2-minute blast from the future. Things that have just come up. There was a crash in West Virginia on 911. Reports of a crash. We can't really get details, but that explains why we had visions of this crash. It was probably the plane that was supposed to hit the Pentagon. The chair in Montauk lore that I've been talking about. My dad's, the nightmare of my dad. The chair is part of Montauk lore. I just found out. It's a time machine of some kind. Perhaps my dad was in it at some point. He worked on Long Island at one point. And recently, I got in touch with a museum, UFO museum in Sweden, AFU, Archives for UFO Research. They promised me Woody Derenberger correspondence for my video. I sent them the video. They sent me back a file that had been sanitized, no Neff Woody Derenberger correspondence. And they kind of tried to pit me against Derenberger's daughter. It was very strange. And couple this with some of the things I've been finding out about Keel's interest in the Swedes. Keel said that he showed pictures to a lot of MIB witnesses, and they said that it was the racial type that seemed to fit who they had seen were Laplanders from northern Sweden. And there was something else about Sweden. They sent I don't know if they sent a guy, but a guy from Sweden came over and fell in love with Linda Scarberry right after she had her Mothman encounter. On the edge, on the edge, on the edge, on the edge, on the edge of reality. My feelings, they change from a mild discontent to a yearning so strange
light.